Who else called during that time? Why did you choose Cleveland? He said, it's the only call I got. So he's playing with some joy right now. And
this guy is unstoppable. And this passing game looks unlike anything we've seen the Cleveland Browns have.
Less than 2 months ago, Joe Flacco was out of the NFL. The 38-year-old had been playing pro football every year since 2008, but most of the world believed that his career was over, and he had a lot to be proud of. Former Super Bowl MVP had won a lot and earned a lot of money over the last decade and a half, but the football book on Joe Flacco seemed to have already included its last chapter. But a remarkable string of unlikely events presented Joe with an opportunity to come back after spending most of the season on his couch. With the Cleveland Browns in desperate need of a quarterback, they turned to a man that had terrorized their team for years. Since joining the Cleveland Browns in late November, Joe Flacco had engineered one of the most unlikely comebacks in NFL history. And the crazy part is he's experienced. He's achieved postseason glory before, he's won a Super Bowl before, and now he's got a chance to lead an old rival to a level of playoff success that they haven't had in a generation. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Consider joining our channel membership program to support these extra long deep dives. Now that we get all that out of the way, break! We made $1,100 off of a $20 entry on Prize Picks. And it wasn't just me, it was everyone that followed these picks on my Instagram story. And the best feeling is the amount of people that made money as a result of this. I mean, bam, 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 bam! My DMs were flooded, so the best part for me was seeing you guys make money as well. But we're not done yet. If you haven't signed up for Prize Picks, use my promo code Mikerophone to double your deposit up until $100 on Prize Picks. And I give away my picks on a daily basis for free on my Instagram story and now my Snapchat story. We're having so much fun doing this. I'm so happy that I made you guys some money. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mike check 1212. What's going on, everybody? The Baltimore Ravens were turning over a new leaf in 2008. Coming off of a 5-11 season in 2007, the Ravens hired John Harbaugh as their new head coach. With their first round pick, Baltimore selected Joe Flacco with the 18th overall pick out of Delaware after trading down and back up to get him. Flacco got the chance to start right away as a rookie, showcasing his strong arm and ability to see down the field as a prototypical pocket passer. While he didn't exactly put up great numbers, he did enough to help out his defense as Baltimore flipped their old record, finishing as an 11-5 wildcard team. Buoyed by the team's defense, Flacco helped the Ravens to road wins over the Dolphins and Titans before losing in the AFC Championship game to the arch rival Pittsburgh Steelers, who went on to win the Super Bowl. Still, not a bad start to his career. The Baltimore Ravens regressed to 9-7 in his second season, but they still earned a wildcard berth and beat the New England Patriots in the wildcard game, despite Joe Flacco only throwing 10 passes. However, their lifeless offense cost them in the divisional round against the Indianapolis Colts. Despite finishing 12-4 in 2010, the Ravens still only entered the playoffs as a wild card. Flacco had his best playoff game yet in the first round against the Kansas City Chiefs, as the Baltimore Ravens cruised to an easy win, but they had to travel to Pittsburgh in the divisional round, and the offense wilted in the second half as they lost by a touchdown. Joe Flacco finally got his first division title in 2011, finishing 12-4 and won his fifth playoff game in the divisional round against the Houston Texans. Flacco had his first 300-yard playoff game in the AFC Championship. The Baltimore Ravens lost in the worst possible way you ever could lose. After driving down the field to set up a 32-yard game-winning field goal by Billy Cundiff would miss terribly on a 32-yard field goal. So Joe Flacco didn't necessarily have the worst start to his career. A few things going the right way, and he may have won the Super Bowl by this point. But seasons 2 through 4 had been pretty similar for Flacco. In each of those 3 years, he had about 3,600 passing yards, 20 to 25 touchdowns, 10 to 12 interceptions, all while the defense remained the team's strong suit. In today's NFL, we'd refer to this type of quarterback as a
game managers. They're not difference makers.
And when you say game manager, I'm not asking you to go out and win the game. I'm just asking you not to lose.
Not to lose the game.
The crazy part is the Baltimore Ravens were competitive in the playoffs in each of the first 4 seasons. They won a playoff game in each of those seasons, but had yet to reach the Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. There are questions about whether or not Joe Flacco was elite, and the problem was that his contract was about to expire. In 2012, Flacco had about 3,800 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, and Baltimore won the division with a 10-6 record. When the playoffs began, everything clicked for Flacco in a way that the league had never seen. He had 282 yards and 2 touchdowns as the Ravens won at home over rookie Andrew Luck and the Indianapolis Colts 24-9. In Denver during the divisional round, Joe Flacco outdueled Peyton Manning with 331 passing yards and 3 touchdowns as the Baltimore Ravens were able to beat the Denver Broncos in double overtime. The most famous play of that game was the 70-yard touchdown pass Joe Flacco threw to Jacoby Jones to tie the game with 31 seconds left. Baltimore then went to New England for the second year in a row to play in the AFC Championship game, and this time the Ravens got revenge. Joe Flacco was able to outduel Tom Brady, throwing for 240 yards and 3 touchdowns, and the Ravens finally got past the Patriots to get to the Super Bowl, dubbed famously as the Har Bowl. However, Joe Flacco saved his best for last in Super Bowl 47. Flacco went 22 of 33 for 287 yards and 3 touchdowns as the Baltimore Ravens held off the San Francisco 49ers to win their second Super Bowl in franchise history in the final game of Ray Lewis's career. Joe Flacco won Super Bowl MVP, capping one of the greatest postseason runs by a quarterback in NFL history. He had over 1,100 yards, 11 touchdowns, and no interceptions during those playoffs while going toe-to-toe with some of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. And as a result, Joe Flacco was finally able to do it. He finally convinced the Baltimore Ravens that he was an elite quarterback worth building around, and the Baltimore Ravens would reward him as such. But this reward for Joe Flacco would be a horrific mistake that would change his career forever. The Baltimore Ravens rewarded Joe Flacco in the offseason with the biggest contract in NFL history at the time, a 6-year deal worth about $120 million. But things were about to get way worse for Joe Flacco. We already mentioned how Ray Lewis would retire following the Super Bowl victory, but that wasn't the only part of the defense that was leaving. Ed Reed, the legendary ball-hawking safety that formed a unique tandem with Ray Lewis on the Ravens defense, departed for the Houston Texans. Paul Kruger would take a huge contract with the Cleveland Browns, and it wasn't just the defense that would take a huge hit. The Baltimore Ravens offense was about to get way worse as well. Anquan Boldin would get traded to the team that the Baltimore Ravens just defeated in the Super Bowl, and Ray Rice would undergo an off-the-field catastrophe that ruined his career. When you combine all of these factors, which create a weaker team, with the fact that Joe Flacco was now the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, it made it nearly impossible for the Baltimore Ravens to improve their team at all, and the result was disastrous. Joe Flacco would throw for 3,900 passing yards in 2013, but would have the most turnovers in his career up until that point, throwing for 19 touchdowns and 22 interceptions as the Baltimore Ravens offense slipped. The Ravens went 8-8 and missed the playoffs for the first time in Flacco's career. He nearly had his first career 4,000-yard season in a bounce-back 2014, throwing a career-high 27 touchdowns as Baltimore got back into the playoffs with a 10-6 record. Joe Flacco would get his second playoff win versus the Steelers, throwing for 259 yards and 2 touchdowns as Baltimore won in Pittsburgh in the wild card round. Against the New England Patriots in the divisional round, Joe Flacco threw for 292 yards and a playoff career-high 4 touchdowns. But he also threw his first 2 playoff interceptions in nearly 3 years as Baltimore came up short again in New England. After the Ravens got off to a sloppy 3-7 start in 2015, Flacco would tear ligaments in his left knee, which would prematurely end his season. Baltimore finished 5-11 and missed the playoffs. Flacco would rebound with a career-high 4,300 passing yards in 2016, but would only throw 20 touchdowns compared to 15 interceptions. But Flacco was about to get some help. The Baltimore Ravens defense had returned to form, but not the offense, as Baltimore missed the playoffs again at 8-8. 2017 would get even worse for Flacco. He had just 3,100 yards while throwing just 18 touchdowns to 13 interceptions, and while the Ravens finished 9-7, they missed the playoffs for the 3rd year in a row. The end seemed near when Baltimore traded up to the last pick of the first round to draft Lamar Jackson. With the 32nd pick in the 2018 NFL draft, draft. Still, Flacco began that season as the starter and averaged over 270 yards per game as the Ravens started 4-5. But a hip injury kept him out the next 4 weeks, and by the time he was healthy, Lamar Jackson had already taken over. The Ravens would go 6-1 under Lamar as they turned their season around to win the division. Meanwhile, Joe Flacco never took another snap for the Baltimore Ravens, and that offseason they traded him to Denver for a 4th-round pick, officially ending his tenure as a Baltimore Raven as their most accomplished passer ever. He opened 2019 as Denver's starter as the team struggled early. His passing yards were limited as he only had 6 touchdowns and 5 interceptions through 8 games. Flacco's frustration boiled over after Denver fell 2-6, and he called out his team after blowing a second-half lead to the Colts.
Oh, I mean, come on. I just look at it like we're now a 2-6 football team, and we're like afraid to go for it in a 2-minute drill. You know, like who cares if you give the ball back to the guys with 1 minute and 40 seconds left? They obviously got the field goal anyway. And once again, we're a 2-6 football team, and it just feels like we're kind of afraid to lose a game.
Just a day later, Denver announced that he'd missed the following game because of a herniated disc in his neck. A couple of days later, they put him on injured reserve, which ended his season. That offseason, Denver released him during his unceremonious tenure with the team. During 2020 free agency, Flacco had surgery to repair the disc in his neck, which was critical for him to get signed to another team. Later that month, the New York Jets signed him to a modest 1-year deal to be the backup for Sam Darnold. Flacco ended up starting the 4 games that Darnold missed in 2020, but they lost every game he played in during their dreadful 2-14 season. Still, he rehabbed his value enough that the Philadelphia Eagles came calling that offseason and signed him to a bigger 1-year contract to back up Jalen Hurts. However, Flacco never appeared in a regular season game with Philadelphia, and 7 weeks into the 2021 season, the Eagles traded him back to the Jets for a 6th-round pick. With rookie Zach Wilson injured, the Jets needed another QB, especially since the only other one on the active roster was Mike White, who had just made his NFL debut. Flacco ended up playing in only 2 games, starting in 1, which was the least amount of playing time he's ever had in his career. New York would bring him back after the season once again, re-signing him to another 1-year deal, keeping their QB room intact. When Wilson suffered a bone bruise and a meniscus tear in the preseason, Joe Flacco became the starter to open up the 2022 season. He started the first 3 games, throwing over 40 times in each game, and his most notable performance came during week 2 in Cleveland. The Jets trailed the Browns by 13 with 1:22 to go before storming back thanks to a long touchdown pass by Flacco, recovered onside kick, and a game-winning touchdown with 15 seconds left to stun the Cleveland Browns 31-30. He finished the game with 307 yards and 4 touchdowns, but Flacco hardly played once Wilson returned in week 4. He came in briefly during a week 13 loss to Buffalo, started a meaningless season finale against the Miami Dolphins, and that was the last time the NFL world saw Joe Flacco. Despite multiple teams losing starters to long-term injuries, most of the season went by as the 38-year-old remained unsigned. For the first time since his pro career began, Joe Flacco wasn't with the team to start training camp as he stared down the barrel of a forced retirement. Meanwhile, as Joe Flacco sat on his couch, the Cleveland Browns were embarking on an important season. Cleveland entered the 2nd year of the Deshaun Watson era with big expectations. After back-to-back seasons without a playoff appearance, Kevin Stefanski entered the season with his seat feeling a little warm. There was a lot of pressure for the Cleveland Browns to win in 2023 and see returns on their big investment in Deshaun Watson, which increasingly seemed like an all-time horrific decision. The Cleveland Browns started 2-1 with Watson, including one of his best performances as a Brown in their Week 3 win over the Titans. But surprisingly, just hours before their Week 4 game against Baltimore, Watson was unexpectedly ruled out with a shoulder injury. That thrust rookie Dorian Thompson-Robinson in his first career start, which was disastrous as Cleveland got blown out 28-3. Even after a Week 5 bye, Watson still wasn't good to go against the San Francisco 49ers. After a poor showing from the rookie, the Cleveland Browns decided to start PJ Walker, who they elevated from their practice squad. He promptly led Cleveland to a pair of improbable tight wins. A last-second missed field goal helped the Browns hand San Francisco their first loss, 19-17. Watson tried to give it another go the next week in Indianapolis, but couldn't return after re-injuring his shoulder early. Walker ended up playing most of the game and helped the Browns win a 39-38 thriller to improve to 4-2. But the next week, Walker threw a late pick at Seattle that went off of a defensive lineman's helmet, setting up the Seahawks' game-winning touchdown. Thankfully for the Browns, Watson returned the next week as they got back on track, shutting out the hapless Cardinals 27-0. And their next game in Baltimore featured a furious Cleveland rally after trailing by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. Watson completed all 14 pass attempts in the second half and helped set up the game-winning field goal as time expired, improving the Browns to 6-3. But just days after playing hero for the Browns, the team announced that he'd have to undergo season-ending shoulder injury, a devastating blow to their season. And yet, Cleveland, with Thompson Robinson reinstalled as their starter, won with another last-second field goal to beat Pittsburgh and improve to 7-3. Even with the clutch heroics from the rookie, the Browns offense didn't look so good for much of the game as their elite defense once again carried the load. Little did the world know that the Cleveland Browns had already made a call to their season savior. On the Thursday before their victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers, Joe Flacco was spotted boarding a plane to Cleveland. The Browns brought him in along with other veteran free agents to a workout that Friday. During the team's victory Monday, they officially added him to the practice squad. Although they planned to keep Thompson Robinson as the starter, it was a weird addition for Browns fans. After all, he tormented them for years in Baltimore and even recently last season in dramatic fashion, with the Jets owning an 18-3 career record against Cleveland. The next game in Denver, the offense fell flat as the Browns got punked by the Broncos 29-12. DTR had to leave the game after taking a hit to the head, forcing PJ Walker to finish and putting Cleveland's starting plans in flux for their upcoming game against the Rams. Ahead of the game, Cleveland announced that Joe Flacco would be their starter just a couple of weeks after signing with the team. The Browns lost, but Flacco showed that he still had arm strength and looked good overall, keeping the game close until late in the fourth quarter. Ahead of their Week 14 game against Jacksonville, Kevin Stefanski wouldn't name a starter between Flacco and the now healthy DTR. Shortly before the game, news broke that Flacco would get the nod. It ended up being the right call as Flacco had the Browns' first 300-yard game of the season while tossing for 3 touchdowns as the Browns beat the Jaguars 31-27. He played so well that shortly after the game, Stefanski named him the starter for the rest of the season. In a short amount of time, Joe Flacco had won over the coaching staff, his teammates, and the fan base. Just listen to how quiet it got in the locker room as he addressed the team after the win.
These are what makes teams, these tough games. You know, you guys earn the right all year to play December football, and that's what we're doing right now, and that's what it looks like sometimes. And then January and February, this is what it's going to be, and to have the mental toughness to come through in those types of games, that's what winter's made of. So, you know, hey, bring these games on. It's just going to make us better in the long run. And I appreciate you guys having me, man. I feel like a 10-year-old kid out there.
That was his final game coming up from the practice squad as the Cleveland Browns signed him to the active roster later that week. His agent later reported that Joe Flacco said no to multiple teams who reached out with contract offers, choosing to stay with the Browns. A far cry from being out of the league on his couch. The good times were here to stay. In their next game, down 10 in the fourth quarter to Chicago, Joe Flacco rallied the Browns to an improbable 20-17 victory as they survived the Bears' Hail Mary on the last play. Joe Flacco finished with 374 passing yards, with 212 of them being in the fourth quarter alone, the most by any Cleveland Browns quarterback in any quarter over the last 45 seasons. This included the game-tying 51-yard touchdown to Amari Cooper. Against the Texans, Flacco threw for 368 passing yards and 3 touchdowns as the Browns jumped out to a 29-point lead before holding on for the win. It was the first time in his career that he had thrown for more than 300 yards in 3 straight games. 265 of those yards went to Cooper, who set the franchise record for the most receiving yards in a game. Flacco became the team's leading passer on the season in yards and touchdowns in just 4 games. Since taking over as the starter, he's led the league in passing yards and touchdown passes. Somehow, Cleveland's 4th quarterback of the season was their best. It's been far from perfect as he has had 7 interceptions and at least 1 in each game, but his patented arm strength and veteran presence have been a winning recipe. Especially considering his recent NFL odyssey, he's been an incredibly easy person to root for. Just listen to his post-game interview after the Texans' victory.
If I would have told you 6 weeks ago that you'd be heading into a Thursday night game in Week 17 to clinch a spot for the Cleveland Browns into the playoffs, you would have told me what?
Man, it's unbelievable. How about that? All these games matter. It's so fun to be playing, you know, really meaningful football in December again.
It brings me back a while, but man, it's a blast.
The Browns are on the verge of clinching just their third playoff berth since they returned as an expansion team in 1999. They haven't been to a conference championship game since 1989, with only 2 playoff wins since then. This is a fan base that hasn't had much playoff success in recent memory, but this could be the year that all of that changes thanks to an elite defense and an unlikely hero under center. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section down below. Is Joe Flacco the comeback player of the year? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.